So good afternoon or good morning, wherever you are. And my name is Hugh Simpson-Wells. I'm the CEO of Oxford Computer Group, and I'm going to be demoing today our audit logger for MIM. So this is one of a series of webinars we're doing this week about extending MIM. And this has all come about because MIM's been very much in people's minds as people consider upgrading from FIM to MIM, or even from ILM to MIM. ILM, of course, is going out of the support fairly soon. And it's a good time to consider the kind of extensions that might be useful. And so we brought up the idea that there are various extensions that our customers are interested in, we've been doing for customers, and would people like to hear about them? And so we're doing this series of webinars. I'm actually doing a couple of webinars today. We need some clear space between them, so this won't go on for the full half hour. We'll definitely have a clean break at 25 past the hour. And I'll also try and allow some time for questions. And actually the things I'm going to be talking about are a couple of fairly simple extensions today, and so we may well be even shorter than that. So let me tell you a little bit about what we're talking about here. Let's look at a typical situation where FIM or MIM, either, it doesn't matter, is automating synchronization. So we've got an HR system, typically authoritative for a lot of data, providing information to a number of other systems. Active Directory is usually there. There may be some other system like a security system or an SAP, ERM type system. The MIM portal may be part of it, but that's part of my argument here. So let's get into that. These systems may or may not have their own audit function. It is possible that you are already auditing Active Directory or some other system, or that they haven't got their own audit function. MIM provisions accounts to these various systems and synchronizes attributes to them, and of course those attributes, many of them may be of interest from an audit perspective. Things like job title and department, which are often used for generating group memberships and hence permissions, or indeed they might very directly affect roles in a ERM system or something like that, which again may affect access that people get. And of course we'll be enabling disabling accounts. So all this stuff goes through MIM. Now if the MIM portal is deployed, then it is possible to flow the attributes of interest out to the MIM portal and then use MIM reporting to keep a change history, which gives you some kind of audit. The trouble is that many deployments don't use the MIM portal, either because of licensing costs or because of the additional server requirements that typically go with that. So let's imagine that we haven't got the portal, which by the way, for our customer base is typical. So let's go in a slightly different direction. Let's imagine we've got some other system, just to put something in that gap, some kind of temporary staff management system, something incidentally I'll be talking about in half an hour. If we could track changes that go through the synchronization engine, that would give us a lot of very useful information. We could report on changes in systems that don't have a built-in audit function, and we would also be able to track changes both in the source and the targets of any changes. So if the change happens in HR, not only can we see that the change happened in HR, we can see that the change was actually sent out to Active Directory or what other systems they are. In other words, it gives us, in addition to the straightforward, what do we think is going on in those systems, it gives us a little bit of diagnostic information as well about how the data flowed through MIM. Now, I guess we have to say right from the beginning, we are not auditing the actual systems, but we are able to audit an attribute that flows back from those systems. In other words, we're pretty sure it has happened. We don't necessarily just have to say, we think we flowed a change to AD. We can actually read it back and check it and say, ah, yes, we have a very high degree of confidence that it did flow to AD. And so we're somewhere between actually auditing those systems and what we think is going on in those systems. Okay, simple auditing for MIM, how does it work? Well, the first thing here is this is a very simple implementation. This is not like a full-blown auditing, reporting type system. We've kept the brief very simple here. So minimal deployment costs, with the sort of standard out-of-box configuration that comes with the audit logger. And the data collected is collected as part of the standard synchronization cycle. So as the synchronization takes place, we collect the data. What's actually going on is that we simply include a call to another executable at various points during the synchronization cycle. So we might, for example, read in changes from the HR system and then grab any changes that have gone through. Then we might send the changes out to the other systems and again grab any changes that have gone through. So we've got an executable in which we call, which is grabbing that data from MIM. We also provide then a simple querying tool in order to show the results of that. Data is stored in SQL Server on the same SQL Server instance that you would have with MIM in any case, very low overhead. And we provide a querying interface that pulls data from that, but you could also use, you could drop it into an Excel spreadsheet. You could use Power BI, you could use SQL Server reporting services, whatever makes sense to you. Very scalable up to any size of implementation. And it's entirely extendable, so it's configurable to include whatever additional attributes you want. You do choose the attributes that you want to include, and that's done through simple configuration within the SQL Server database itself. This can be retrofitted to an existing FIM or MIM implementation very easily. As I say, it sits on the same SQL Server instance, no additional overhead, uses Windows integrated security. When the querying interface is really very, very simple. As I say, this is just what's provided out of the box, as it were. It's a SQL Server database, so you can pull the data as you see fit using whatever tool you like. So here's a very simple query which has been done based on staff numbers. If somebody wants to know what's been happening to this person, what changes have happened to this person, we just want an audit for this person. Of course, we could have different styles of report and audit if we wanted to, but that's the question here. What change happened to this person with this staff number? We can, by the way, configure this in lots of different ways. This tool is normally part of an OCG implementation, and so it can be configured in all sorts of different ways, and this is really just a typical configuration. We get the date and time of each modification, and for each monitored attribute, each attribute we've decided that we need to track, like employee status, for example. That might be status in the HR system, status in AD, status in some other system. For each of the attributes we decided to monitor, we get the modified value. Now, in general, values might come from lots of different systems and might be sent to lots of different systems. So the style we've got of identifying the attributes concerned are we have the system and then followed by the name of the attribute. So the status flowing in from HR is tracked and the status flowing out to AD is tracked. Literally, it is the status flowing in from AD, by the way, but we recognize that that's a target rather than a source. In other words, we are flowing the change back in and recording that rather than saying, oh, we sent it out. But it amounts to the same thing. A change in HR is resulting in a change in AD because that's the way that this has been configured, that this implementation of FIM or MIM has been configured. We also notice we have a building security system. The building security system, we control which floors somebody's allowed to have access to, and it's telling us about changes that have happened in that system, again, resulting from changes in their HR attributes. We can also see their department, for example, in this case, their display name and their login ID and so on. If they change department, that's also tracked. Now, because this is a demo system, you'll see that a lot of things happen on the same day because that's when I happen to be testing it, and often there are only seconds between changes, but it amounts to it doesn't matter. That's just a detail. Okay, let's have a look at the system itself. There's nothing very sexy to look at here. It's all pretty straightforward back office style stuff. If you're familiar with the synchronization service, you'll immediately recognize that we have a number of different management agents here. If you're not, then quite simply we're connected to a number of different systems, and the key ones that we care about here are Active Directory, an HR system, and perhaps this security system that I was talking about. The rest of them may or may not be relevant to us here, but those are the ones that I'm going to focus on. And I've got a guy here called Adrian Dumitrascu. He is one of the people in this HR system. Obviously, this is for demo purposes. It isn't a real HR system, and it only holds a few attributes. But in general, you would have a more complicated system, and that makes no difference to the argument. So if I were, for example, to change his status from active to inactive in the HR system and save that change, then during the regular cycle of activity, FIM or MIM will import that data and make a change. So let's take a look at this person. We need to, of course, know his staff number if we're going to query that easily. So 537037, I'm going to put in there 537037. So this is a simple interface that we provide, and you'll see that already his status is inactive, and it just updated, you might have seen that, to show that his account's been disabled. So he became inactive in HR. The business rule that we've implemented in FIM is that that should lead to a disablement of his account in AD, and also to his building security being revoked so that he's not allowed into any floors. Ordinarily, his status as somebody in HR would have given him access to certain floors. Just to show that happening again, we'll make him active again, we'll save it, and I've got MIM cycling every 10 seconds or so. So quite quickly, we should see, first of all, the change come in from HR, and that should pop up any moment. And a little while later, we'll see the change coming in from AD to confirm that that change happened, and also we'll see the change coming in from the building security system. Depending on how you handle this, on how you make the calls from the synchronization cycle that's going on to the audit logger that's logging the changes, you will get more or less, you'll get a greater or lesser granularity of data being gathered. So in this case, we've separated the changes in HR, being the authoritative system, from the rest, and the rest come through in another row. So looking at this, you'll see a series of changes, and you can see I've been testing it. It says active, inactive, active, inactive. I've just been testing it. If I make a change to department and put him in a different department and save those changes, we'll see that come through as a change to his department. And that may cause additional changes in some other system. It all depends how it's been configured. So that's one way in which we might want to query things. So we come along and we say something's happened. Somebody perhaps, it seems, had access to something they shouldn't have had access to, or we just want to prove what they had access to. We search by an individual. Oh, there you see the response having come through to say, okay, if he's not in HR, he can't go to floor 2. Doesn't matter what these systems are, have as many of these as you like. There's another way that you might want to search then. That's searching for an individual by some reliable attribute, in this case his staff ID number. We could search by something else. Another possibility is that you want to look at it from the point of view of a period of time, a window of time. In this case, obviously, I've been doing a lot of changes today, so I'm looking at basically today. And I could look at a particular attribute of interest. We don't store that many attributes of interest in this case, but this could be as big a list as you like. And we could say, well, whose employee status has changed? And if I scroll down, we'll not be surprised to see Adrian featuring quite a lot. Also, this other person, Mary Day, we could double-click that and go through and look at and search for her. So there's another way in which we can search. First of all, what changes have happened within a window? for a particular attribute. In other words, you might have a group which is dependent on the department, and so you might be saying, give me all the people whose department changed in this time, and so on. Having found that list, you can say, well, okay, I'm interested in homing in on this and seeing what else has been going on with this person. Now, as I say, you could query that in any way you like. It's simply data in SQL Server. Very often we find people just want to drop this stuff out to a spreadsheet where it can be analyzed. Sometimes increasingly people like to use Power BI for this kind of thing because it gives them very interesting ways of presenting data, very flexible ways of presenting data. And you know, you could use SQL Server reporting services to write proper SQL reports. So that's it. There isn't much to see. Let me just go back to my diagram, my previous diagram, where I show you that what's basically going on is we first of all, having installed the contractor manager, included another management agent, for those of you that understand what that means, and a little bit of provisioning code, all very straightforward stuff in any MIM implementation. Sorry, I misspoke. Let me start that again, cancel what I just said. What we have is an auditing executable that we call as a result of the synchronization, during synchronization. So perhaps just after we've done an import from HR, that would be a good time, an import and synchronization, that would be a good time to call the audit logger to catch the changes that have come in from HR. When we've exported and done the confirming import and perhaps resynchronized from the other target systems such as Active Directory and any other systems, we would also call the audit logger in order to capture those changes as well. In that way, we get a more fine-grained change than if we just do a complete synchronization and then simply call the audit logger once. What the audit logger does is to identify that changes have happened, store those changes by just for the attributes of interest to another table in SQL Server, and we can query on that as we see fit. So in summary, what we've got then is simple audit logging for the MIM synchronization service, tracks chosen attributes, stores modifications, allows querying via its own interface or other typical reporting, typical ways of reporting and presenting data. Certainly can be retrofitted to an existing FIM or MIM implementation. It uses Windows integrated security, so there's nothing fancy to add there. Minimal additional implementation deployment overheads, and of course, for further information, contact us. You can find a little bit more data about it on our website, but probably the best thing to do is to drop us an email with any further queries you've got. And at this point, what I'd like to do is just launch a poll to ask who might be interested in seeing a more detailed demonstration that might be more relevant to your particular needs and the ability to ask further questions about your particular implementation and so on. Okay, I see that some of you have voted and most of you voted yes. I can imagine there's a logic to people who want to say no, not bothering to vote, so that's fair enough. Okay, thank you very much for that. I'm going to close that now, I think, and of course we can get back to you about that. Also, any questions then that people might have, please type questions if you have any questions. I'm not going to enable sound because it becomes a little bit difficult to handle. So by all means, ask any questions that you might have. But that aside, as I say, I want some clear air between this and the next webinar, which is coming up shortly. The next webinar is about our contractor management system, something with which I just confused myself a moment ago, for those of you that noticed. But that aside, that concludes our webinar for today, and we'll be answering your questions, some of those questions directly ourselves. Let me just, if I've got time, I will answer things directly. What's the cost of the auditing component? I will come back to you about that. We only usually implement it as part of an implementation. If we had sufficient interest in selling it independently, I think we would certainly look at that, in which case I guess we would publish a price. For the moment, it's a bit of a how long is a piece of string question, but let's say that it is really a very reasonable price compared to the typical costs of getting things done of implementing MIM, of implementing changes in MIM. There's nothing really complicated going on here. But I will try and come back with a fuller answer than that directly. I can't see any other questions which are really relevant to everybody, but thanks for asking that question. So I think we'll draw that to a close. As I say, we need a bit of clear space between this and the next webinar. So thanks very much, everybody, for listening, and we'll be in touch as necessary.